All right. Hello and welcome to another Talking Tactics with my good friend Dharnish. It's been a while. We've now seen a number of games from Ruben Amorim's Manchester United across the Premier League, across the FA Cup, across Europe. Some good, a lot of bad, maybe different is a better word than bad. Maybe work in progress is an even better word than any of it to make us all feel a little bit better about what we're watching every week. But some really good in there too, and so we want to break it down. We want to look at all of it and kind of discuss why it is the way it is right now, and potentially look at some of the pitfalls, a lot of which might be down simply to personnel, and then also look at where the good positives may come moving forward. So we're definitely going to get into that here. And again, this is being recorded live on Big Up. So if you're watching this on YouTube, make sure you pop over there and keep have an account and follow me and all of that, so you can come join these lives and everything too. So we'll answer some questions from chat and things like that as we go. So first of all, how have you been, Dharnish? You doing well?
Good, good. I'm busy, just dealing with a lot of United Amrim stuff and getting your ducks in a row in terms of sort of balancing doing the right content and then doing articles and stuff as well. It's been I've been like doing content for 2 odd years now in the United fan base. I've seen like when we were the high highs when Ten Hag was really high, and I've seen the low lows where now Amrim is low, and this is probably the lowest it's been since I've started. You can sense the anger in the fan base, and you can sense how angry people are and how they react to everything. Um, and then I think you go from there and sort of gauge how things are. But it's bad right now on the pitch. It's bad right now off the pitch, and you can tell with the way people are speaking about that in the fan base. I don't blame them. I'm as angry as anybody else. I think it was after the Palace game. Normally, I analyze things logically, but I was like, I'm just tired. I'm kind of fed
Mm,
up watching this.
yeah.
Um, but putting like the logical analysis hat on, I think we can go through things right now, and hopefully people can go through them with us.
Yeah, and I think that for me, I've got a kind of background all of the talk and everything with, to some degree, even though it may be worse than expected. I think that to a large degree, what we're seeing and where it's almost frustrating, and I think why we've avoided doing this for so long, not we, but United have avoided doing this for so long, is that when you're actually committed to rebuilding and tearing things down and implementing a baseline style of play that is very different to what you've been doing for a long time and that you've never done before, this is kind of what it looks like. Like you really have to sometimes break things to get where you want to go. And there should be no mistake about it. What I think United are trying to do now under Amorim, let me know if you agree, on the pitch anyway, is almost as far a departure from the way we've played for years as it can be, especially in the early focus. I mean, it was at the start of last season that Eric Ten Hag said that he wanted United to be the best transition side in the world. And a lot of people at that time were thinking, wait, we been doing this before? Haven't we been
Mm.
doing this for some time? And didn't we hire you to go away from this? But we didn't. And then we became a an extreme transition side last season. The basketball we talked about, the constant up and down the pitch. And then now we have instances in recent games where it's a little bit fickle, I gotta say, where
Mm.
when instead of transitioning really quickly, players will be stopping, pausing, passing backwards, uh, and the crowd goes very very groany with these types of actions. But surely this is on purpose. It is a focus. It is almost like an overemphasis on slowing the game down and building these possession principles. What do you think about all of this, just in general?
Um, I think that there's a number of factors that are going on here. For the record, I didn't think that this system would be as not as bad as it's been. Um, I just didn't think that this system would not work to the level that it has.
Right.
But I think we have to factor in this is a league where everybody is being found out, everyone.
Yes.
So Tottenham, City,
Hmm.
have
Arsenal.
been found out. Bournemouth are seventh. They're 3 points off third.
Yeah. Forest
Fulham,
up there. Yeah.
Forest are second or third. Fulham
Yeah.
can still get to Champions League. It's
Yeah.
not a league where anybody is. It feels like the league 2 years ago when I think remember the relegation went down to the last day.
Yeah.
No, I think Leeds were sort of gambling with
Yes.
managers. They bought Jesse Marsh and they just about survived. I remember that season in 22-23 with Ten Hag. Every week I was like, God, that's a difficult game. That's a difficult
Yeah.
game. It's not
The
teams.
league's the Premier's getting like that, isn't it? Like there's not the big 4 or 5 or 6 and this
No, I
big
don't think
gap to
so.
everybody else. It's like it's kind of a mush of it nowadays. I mean, a lot of clubs just play good football. I mean, Aston Villa, it's not like they're doing poorly in the Champions League, even. We've seen teams make the Champions League, right? Like those lower teams do 1 year and then they fall off really hard. But we're kind of seeing the teams get good and kind of stay good now. It's rather
Yeah,
than falling off instantly the next season.
there's 10 points between third and eighth.
Yeah.
So I think it shows that the teams between third and eighth, Forest, Chelsea, City, Newcastle, Bournemouth, and Villa, they're not. They're all teams. Some of those teams were some of the best teams last season,
Yeah.
and then they haven't adapted to the league this season for
Yeah.
whatever reason. Villa and City played a lot of games, and they can't keep up with the physicality. The bottom line is the league this season. I had a friend I think a few weeks ago. I think he's an Everton fan. He was like, "God, I can't believe we got beat by Bournemouth." I was like, "Dude, they're one of the best teams in the league now
Yeah.
because teams have a group of analysts and they know that if we set up in a certain way out of possession and we have physical players, we're gonna do well in this league." But I think the
Yeah.
main thing is as well is around and about the first 15 games, I think I was listening to Stadio, and they caught on it first more than anybody else did, and they said the league is different now because teams are having a go when they
Yeah.
know that they can. Before last season, the amount of Man City games that I saw where it was just okay, how long is it going to take for Pep to break this team down?
Yeah. They
And they
just
were all
sit. They
camping
just
Sadio
sit. They
on
just
ball.
sit. Yeah.
When the first few results come in, it wasn't,
Yep.
I thought, okay, the league will figure itself out come game week 15, 16, 18, 17. But teams are going in with the mindset of we can actually win here. We can actually
Yep.
bulldoze them. So I think we got to factor that in. Number two is it's a system where they're in the right place. I don't know how many times I'll say this. They're in the right place and they're doing the right things. It lacks zip. It
Mm.
lacks precision. It lacks the movement. Infuriates me. It's
Yeah.
infuriating to see the lack of movement from these players. And I
Yep.
don't like to dig any of these players out, but if Southampton and Leicester City know exactly how to set it up against you, you have a problem. You have a
Hmm.
problem in the fact that the players probably don't suit the system that you're playing in. Okay, fine. You didn't choose these players. You came in mid-season in the busiest time of the year, and they told
Yeah.
you there isn't that many room for transfers.
Yep.
Number two, if you can't yet figure out solutions yet, the next part for me to figure out is there no solutions to the system? As in, you can't find gaps in the opposition because number one, maybe there isn't enough movement. Number two,
Yep.
teams know exactly how to set up against you. And number three is if we go 10 more games into this, are we going to start finding gaps? That's what I
Right.
want to know. Because at the moment, we can get some pictures up now if you want. Just go to the first ones, the second ones. They're all the same, from around about
Yeah.
Ipswich, then we go to Forest, Bournemouth, Brighton, Palace. All of those games,
Let me just pull this up. I'm gonna
Yeah, go
change
ahead.
how these look here. Hold on 1 second. There we go.
That's fine. Just go to the first one, one of the few earlier
Yeah,
ones.
yeah. There's
This is
this
one of the
one.
captains.
Yeah, let me hold on. Let me do it a little bit differently. No, let's go like this. All right, there we go. Yeah.
One of the ones against Southampton.
Oh, this was Ipswich. This one was Ipswich. Let me switch it to one of the Southampton ones because
Yeah,
I
yeah,
know
go
what
ahead.
you're talking about. All right, let's go here. Cool.
Okay, here we go. Perfect. So this is the problem, and this is the worst team in the league, by the way.
Yep.
This is the worst team in the league. What's happening here is whichever side the ball goes on, whether it be left or right, teams know you have to mark the 2-3 centre backs at the back. In this case, the two centre backs on the left hand side are the Ligt and Martinez. The strikers are marking them. The inside channel runner, Garnacho's doing the right thing here. He's dragging his.
Yeah.
That's one of the centre backs of Southampton. He's dragging him all the way in.
Yes.
Masraoui has the ball, and as it goes wide, Southampton's fullback pushes up on him. There is no space there. There's none. The inside pass to the spare midfielder is, I think it's Ugarte or Fernandes. He's been marked by a Southampton player as
Yeah,
well.
over by the scoreboard is Fernandes there. Yeah. Yep.
Against Man City, for some reason, their out of possession structure was so dumb. That pass to the inside midfielder to Fernandes was always on. There was always a spare man inside against City.
Now, I wanted to note on this that because I definitely saw this against Southampton, and I think it'd be good after we go through a couple pictures to look at the board on this. Is that Southampton, of course, also play back three, and so naturally it was like they can match the shape because they can get those fullbacks or wingbacks right up against our wingbacks, right?
Yeah,
And so
absolutely.
they can pretty much match the wideness of the width of the shape was matched man to man, basically, right?
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, they're being a little bit brave here because Bree was one of the centre backs. He was one of the three
Yeah.
centre backs. Garnacho's doing the right thing here. He absolutely is. He's pulling him all the way out and then all the way in. The problem United had with this game until Xerxes came on in the second half and changed things.
Yes.
That pass there to Mazraoui is going where? It's going to Hoyland.
Yeah,
Now,
and I can pull that up too because you have a good picture of this.
he's
Let me find
not.
that one.
Hoyland's like a hot topic with Man United fans at the minute because he's not the best target man. He's not the best. Can you make the ball stick striker? The thing is was he one of these strikers when we signed him? I don't think so. But you have had so many games now where the manager is telling you when you're the spare man, we need the ball to stick for you. Stop wrestling so much. I hate to say it. It's a joke on mine.
It's just what's happening.
It's not WrestleMania. All right, you are just wrestling too much.
Yeah.
And the thing is, I've seen games where he does make the ball stick. That's the problem.
Yeah.
But if you take a look at this now, the only outball that United have is to Hoyland.
And it was happening all game this against Southampton because the only space was behind, was where Hoyland could drop in around this like center circle into the sides. That's the only ball where he could, but you have to come off the center backs to do that, right? Not back into them, but run short and kind of catch it and pick it up and then lay it off to someone.
What I would like to see instead is maybe if you want to use his skills a little bit more, if you're going to go long, just go long and punch it down the line so you can run into the...
Towards the corner flag or something, right?
At least you put 50 yards forward and then Hoyland's good in the channels at least. But this is what's happening at the moment. This is the biggest problem United have had since Amram. There is no way to access the middle. Every time they go long, unfortunately, it's Hoyland playing and he can't make the ball stick. So, hey presto, the ball comes back to them.
Yep.
Now, I want to talk about the movement or the lack of the movement from the 2 10s next to the striker.
Yeah,
it's exactly the same here, but I feel as though personally there is a lack of movement from both number 10s next to the striker, next to Xerxes, next to Hoyland. There's a lack of movement always. I want to see, I don't know if they've been instructed to do this. I think they have. The two midfielders in the middle, which is like normally Mainu and Ugarte or Bruno and Ugarte, they don't move. They don't move at all. It's in the middle of the pitch. They're surrounded by 4 midfielders. There was one instance against Leicester in the Cup where Bruno actually was low wide left and he dragged the player out. A Leicester player came to press him. He knocked it inside to Agate, and that's what can happen when there's more movement. I
Yeah.
think there needs to be more movement from the players in this system.
Yes.
If you have more movement, you have more rotations, and you drag players out more. I can't tell if they're more nervous, like Amrim and the players are saying in this system, or I can't tell if there is just a lack of movement because they're lackadaisical. I take a look at Amad Diallo, and I
Yeah.
think things happen on that side just because he does everything with such gusto, and just because there
Correct.
is so much movement there. Sometimes if he doesn't get it high, he'll drop deep. Sometimes
Yep.
if it isn't working deep, he will try and get it long and then try shove his man off, and he's just a very good presser.
Yep.
If there was more movement and more enthusiasm from all the United players in this system, I feel like they would get more space. But this is the biggest problem because I think it's going to just keep happening until the end of the season, until he finds the right solutions. Um, if you go now to the Ipswich one, because
Yep.
I just want to see that one.
Find that one here, and I had a second ago. Here we go.
Yeah, okay. So this is, by the way, Johnny Evans is one of the left centre backs here. Damn, I
Yeah.
forgot about that. The first game.
Yeah.
So this is one way where we can access space, and Maguire does it as well. I'll send you another image if we can maybe get it up.
Yeah.
Maguire does this really well. Martinez does this really to a degree really well. The point is here, the wing backs were really high.
Yes.
So Dalla was really high, and I think it was maybe Mazraoui on the other side
Probably. Yeah. Yeah.
that was really high. But there's a space.
Actually, Ahmad was the wingback on the other side in that first
Was
game.
it was
Yeah,
Ahmad was the
because
wing back.
he got the first goal. He ran on that side and crossed it into Rashford, from what I recall. Yeah.
There's a space that happens from in between where the midfield is, where the opposition midfield is, and where the opposition strikers are, because they're busy pressing the three centre backs at the back, and your wing back is really high. There's a little space, and I've seen Maguire access it constantly.
Yep.
That's where that space is. This is how they can do it. The fullback was really high. Garnacho has done the right thing here. Now, interestingly, again, take a look at who's marking Garnacho. It's Duan Zibe.
Yeah.
Against Southampton, again, it was a left centre back in a back
Yep.
five. Teams aren't stupid; they know this. He's pulling Tuanzebe out and then back in, and then because we have Dallo in space, hey presto, there is your space. Where do you need space in an Amrim system? In the half space or wide.
Yes.
Every single time. It's not. We have a manager who has used one system throughout his time at Sporting Lisbon. Every time, I can't tell you how many, I can't stress this more enough. 80% of the goals they've scored was from this. You
Yes.
find space in the half space, or you find it wide, and then you manipulate with a winger or a fullback.
Yep.
The reason we keep saying Man United not find space is because they can't do this.
Yep.
And it's not really going to change until they do this more.
Yes. Well, I want to, if you mind, if I pull kind of the board up here a little, because I think it helps kind of hold on a sec. Move everything around here. And let me go against South. Let me see if I can find the one against Southampton, because I thought it was. Let me see if I can get it. Or I guess it doesn't particularly matter. Let's go Southampton here, on this side, right? And just looking at like what you mentioned here, like essentially, I can change the personnel and all of that. It doesn't particularly matter too much, just for the sake of discussion. But essentially, what you're saying is they're pressing man to man, like all the way around here, right? And then
Yeah.
the midfield, and this is what every game has looked like, right? I think every single game we've played recently has looked exactly like this. They're pressing man to man. You can see Brie up on Garnacho. That's kind of how it was, and it's like it's man to man everywhere. It's one to one, and that's how it is. And then what happens is, as you were kind of showing it, when the ball moves over to here, the midfield is a little bit like sort of stuck in the middle, right? And Garnacho at times has done the right move, right? Dropping in short. But then when you look at Hoyland in this case, there's really two things that he can do, and this was really normal for Sporting, right? Is you would see this with Jokeres making this run out here and then sending the ball down into the channel when it gets wide, right? Now, one issue that I do think is a problem, which is kind of odd, not odd, but hopefully will be solved, is that like Dallo, if he was left-footed, one, it would be easier for him to send this ball down because usually the press is coming from
True.
inside to out, right? So it's harder to cut back in and then knock it because the player's then more in front of you when you have to go on your right foot than on your left. But that run is important, and it's interesting because that's one of those things where I thought Hoyland would make a good striker. And there was even like a little article in the Athletic today talking about the runs in behind, things like that, compared to Jokeres, because of Sporting, that's what he did a lot, those runs in behind. We kind of we that was, I remember we did do a video on it because we talked about Sporting and how they played. And like you were saying, almost every single goal is, and every single attack was manipulate the wide area over here and then run in,
Hmm.
someone runs in behind, right? One way, like, and there's different variations of it, but they're almost all like that. And the two options I think you have, and we've seen this every game, are make that run in behind or come here because there's a space here behind these
Yeah.
midfielders, and then this ball can come in into there. And the problem we've seen with Hoyland, like against Southampton, is every time this pass came in, he lost it every single time. And then
Yeah.
when Xerxes plays, he wins the ball here almost every single time he gets it. And so that pass becomes like available when Xerxes is playing. He can drop in, receive the ball. So when this man-to-man press happens, you can kind of pass it right into the middle. He will run off the defenders. He will pick the ball up. He will win it. And then you get your runners kind of going by him. You know, they can start to get up the pitch and attack. So we've seen that work. But I think why he kind of persists with Hoyland to a degree is that it is one dimensional, and it doesn't necessarily solve, it's what Xerxes doesn't really make those runs into the channels in the same way that Hoyland does, or that Hoyland can, even though we haven't really been seeing it recently. And I think he would like, that this being a solution, because you want to have more than one way to beat a press, right? Like if your only way is to drop it into here, eventually teams are going to figure that out too. And they're going
Yeah.
to man-to-man press you and block it off. So you have to be able to do both, right? You have to be able to receive it here or turn, spin, run off of here and have the ball passed into the channel. And I think that's one of the reasons it's been so bad, is that Hoyland can't receive the ball here and Xerxes doesn't run into the channels. And so with either striker, we have, when teams press us man to man, they know we only have one way out of the press, just one. We don't have the multiple options available to us. And I think that's a serious problem in a system. And I do think where people what got to understand Amarim's system as well, I know you know this, is that his striker was insanely integral to his build-up process. Not so much always in that dropping deep, but in those channel runs too. Like they're not they've got to be good at running into spaces and picking up the ball, and making those movements. And it's going to be hard to resolve it without someone doing both.
Hmm.
Um, and I think it's a big impetus is on, and it's not the only problem, but a big impetus is on either Xerxes or Hoyland to say, I'm going to have to figure out how to win the ball in these areas and run into the channels at the right times too. Because that's one of the best ways to progress the ball right down, into the final third, hold the play up and let the rest of the team arrive and actually get some possession, right? Because we've seen that we get stuck in the middle every game. We build up, we're moving, and we get stuck in the middle.
Mm,
And there's no vertical attack, like in any sense, that gets us actually up the pitch in a quick way.
I agree. I agree. I think that's the main problem. If you take a look at the Southampton game, there was instances when Xerxes came on where his linker play meant that sometimes he wasn't even letting the ball touch himself. Like
Yeah.
when the ball came, he wasn't even trying to control it. He was more focused on selling the winger. So he
Yes.
knew that Bednarak was being really aggressive with Hoyland. He used that to his advantage and would sell him this way and feint that way. The
Yep.
problem is, I think he started the next game, and then United ran into the same problem again
Yep.
because there are better centre backs than the ones that Southampton
Yes.
have. There are better centre backs than Breen Bednarak. Um, I think one of the games was Brighton, and one of the games
Mm.
was Wolves. So the problem with me is this seems like the only outball that they have at the moment,
Yep.
and it doesn't seem rehearsed either. Sometimes I think they fire it in just because they don't know what else to do.
Yeah.
It would be different if they were baiting the press and Onana
Mm.
was purposely finding Xerxes, but it doesn't feel like they do that. The other outball that they have, if you want to just push Dallo up the pitch,
Well, that was what I was going to mention. Is the other option is
yeah,
if these wing backs were actually
if the wing
high.
backs are high, yeah.
Yeah.
And because the other thing that happens as well is if you want to move Diallo a bit further back and then follow Wellington with him and then keep Howard Bellis there. Yeah, if you just want to move, there, and then push Wellington upon Diallo. So this ball here from Maguire to Mazraoui, and then just move Howard Bellis in a bit.
Yeah. 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 I know what you're saying. Okay. Yep.
Yeah, this is the other
This
ball.
this kind of, I call it it's like the big switch ball from the middle center back out to
Absolutely,
these
absolutely.
high fullbacks is another really key kind of route for passing. It's
This
one
is
or
the
the other,
last
right?
image that I sent you as well. It's a very simple one. There's no analysis with it, but this is the only other ball that I've seen where they can access some space. It tends to happen whenever Maguire's the centre back, like in the middle,
Yes.
and not like Delict, because Delict can't
Let
play
me
this
pull
pass
this up
really.
here. Yes. Let me pull it up because I love this because when I do the watch alongs on here, and I always tell people like, watch, we need the big switch. And I'm always like begging for
This
this
is the big
pass.
switch.
This is the big switch, yeah. So it goes from Maguire in the center, and you can see Dallas like off the screen. He's so high up the pitch, right? And then
That's
he
the switch.
receives it like all the way up over here and on the run. And you can do it to both sides, and it makes a much bigger gap in the team. Now I think that it was funny because we even saw when Malacia played being left-footed, they actually had some decent success, a little more success with that. It's just once he got on it, he wasn't really able to do much with it. But yeah, the big switch from Maguire, and nobody else can play it, which is part of the problem.
Mm. Martinez can, but he's injured.
Yes,
So,
exactly. That's yeah.
and then the third thing that is sort of, I guess, obsolete now because he's injured. The third thing, and I think we see this in Inter Milan. If anybody watches Inter Milan games a lot, we see this at Real Madrid a little bit, but that's a little bit different because they play in a very exciting way where they
Yeah.
don't really have any positional sense, and the players just kind of figure out the solutions on the pitch because they're all elite.
Yeah.
It's more Inter Milan. We'll stick with Inter Milan. The centre backs pushing up from from deep to cause overloads in corners of the pitch. We saw this a lot against Liverpool, but I think Liverpool's a little bit of an outlier because they latched onto one thing and they worked really well with it, which is basically just overload
Right.
Trent side. Anybody who wants some space, just go over to Trent side. But Martinez was doing this more against, we saw it with his goal against Fulham, his assist against Rangers. And Amrim said as well after one of the games, this is what I want my centre backs to do: push up more, higher up the pitch, cause an overload, because he is a player who he can break the lines through the press. He can pass very well. He can shoot. He has a deadly shot. But when you are a centre back pushing up from defence, the opposition has another player to mark who they didn't plan for, basically, and that's that's another way. I want to see Maguire do it more now because
Yeah.
obviously Martinez is injured, but it felt like Martinez had finally sort of the light bulb moment had came for him because you could see in the last few games he was pushing up more and he was getting more space. So it's unfortunate that he's out really because that's the only third way that they were. But that's the
Yeah.
other thing. It's players are getting more familiar in the system. They're figuring things out a little bit more now. So
Well,
hopefully
Dallo
that.
said they were, naturally training in games because they haven't had a lot of time, and someone made a thing for me like they've only had more than 4 days in between, I think twice until
Mm,
now, in
until
between games to train, and you don't get time to train tactically and during that. And we actually saw some decent games when they had a week off. I think it was before Liverpool and before Arsenal. They
yeah.
had a week, and they were actually probably two of the best performances. One of the things I want to ask on that, because of course, like the speed of action is also a part of it, right? Like when talking about that five getting pressed, part of it is often because it moves so slow that
Mm,
the other team is able to shift before the nobody can move as fast as the ball, right? I mean, this is one of the fundamentals of beating a press and of being a football, is that the ball can move faster than players, right? Otherwise, you'd have no chance of ever winning. But if the ball moves slower than players, then they can. It's 10-10. They can always man to man match you if you're going slow, right? If it's slow, if it's ponderous, if you go from one side to the other, and it takes so long that the entire defense can shift to that side, then you don't end up. There was no point going from one side to the other. It doesn't. You're not manipulating them. You're not making space. You're not making movement. The speed, and you mentioned that the speed of action, I think, is a huge part of it. Like, if you look at it, and it's not just one touch passing, but it's like when you get on the ball, one of the things I definitely have noticed that needs to change. In all of these instances, like we focused on passing, right? But one of the things as well that needs to change is the willingness to carry the ball. I think from especially some of these wide players where they've got it. We saw like with Ahmad. I mean, just we see when Ahmad plays at wingback, one of the reasons it tends to work better is he'll move around, he'll get on the ball, and he'll run by somebody, and he'll just go by them, and he'll beat them. And you have to be, if you cannot win any 1v1 battles, then you're not a better team than the opposition, because then you're relying like purely on tactics, and
mm,
player quality isn't a factor. But player quality has to be a factor when you're playing small teams. You have to be a better team. You have to have better players. Otherwise, it's a 50-50 always, right? And I think that is a part of it, is the willingness, the bravery to take a man on from these wide areas, especially to when they press tight, that's your opportunity to get by them and run into space. And that's one of the things that I'm hoping, a player like Dorgu, why he's brought in, it's one of his best strengths, is getting on the ball, carrying it forward through through the midfield into the final thirds, and helping you set the team up. And it's interesting because I feel like the final third play has actually been okay when we get there. If you look at like the end of the Leicester game, 20-30 minutes, a lot of good movements, a lot of good attacks, a lot of cutbacks. We look at Southampton once Xerxes got on and we made it to the final third. A lot
mm.
of good movements, a lot of good actions, a lot of good cutbacks. And we
What,
can
what I,
see that.
I'm trying to figure out is that because they're chasing the game?
But that's what I don't know either, right? It's like, but for
Mm.
some reason we can't get to
We
the,
can't do
like,
that from minute
we
one.
can't. Yeah,
That intensity and that speed isn't there from minute one.
correct. And we
The
just don't
only
get there. We don't get to the final third. Like against
no,
Leicester, we didn't have any shots until the end of the game. And then it's like 10 at 15 at once, in a 20-minute period. And it's like
there's,
somehow,
there's desperation of
yeah,
you
we
might be out of the cup.
exactly.
The only thing that we will see, I think, for the next, we've got 14 games left.
Yep.
This is bad, but I call it about 10 or 11 because it's like the only thing that is left for Man United this season. Just don't get relegated.
Yeah.
Keep building week on week, week out. Work on the system and hope that you get better because there's nothing else. They're not good enough to get to the top 10.
Yeah.
It's certainly not good enough to challenge for the Europa League. Maybe you can scam a cup. Just get better week in, week out. Start to find the gaps. I'm sorry, there's nothing else that you can do. Figure out who the best players are in each position. Figure out what starts to work, because it still feels like he was doing that a little bit. Um,
Yeah,
One thing will work for like 20 minutes in a game. He will start with that, and then that doesn't work, and then you're back to square one again. That
yeah,
honestly, that's what's happening. Mine worked in the left hand in a Europa League game for 20 minutes. Okay, I'll do it at the start. It doesn't work. Okay, fine, I'll change that again, and then the cycle sort of repeats itself. They're just that it feels like what they should have done last summer got done in the winter, and now they're
yes,
trying to do times two speed with everything. So
yeah.
this is like our preseason basically, except the
Hmm.
preseason is against all the teams in one of the toughest leagues,
With
I
very
think,
little training time. Yeah,
in
yeah,
the Premier League ever, and that's all we're seeing. We're not going to see anything else this season. All we
yeah,
can hope for is if the football gets better, if the performances get better. Do the players have a part to play in that? I personally think so. I personally think
yeah.
so. I don't think they're moving enough. I don't think there's enough enthusiasm there.
Yes.
Um, there are still
I think
things to
there's
play
there's
for.
there's bravery that needs to come into it, right? Like just
There's
even if
definitely
you're not
bravery.
sure, it's like just you gotta kind of gotta go for it a little bit more. Like and because it's clear that they can, but that's what sort of my point on taking on players on the dribbles, on carries, on things like that. I feel like there's too many players who are too afraid to make a mistake or too afraid to but now is the time to make mistakes, quite honestly. It is, as much as people don't want it to be, and things are nervous. It's like now is the time to really be brave within the system, and learn and see what works and what doesn't. But we're gonna have to like we're going to have to be a little bit more than a system team to win anything, right? You need that individual kind of quality and such to shine through. You need players who try to break the game a little bit. Um, and I think that's the biggest thing to me as well, is like I guess like I look at Maguire, right? For example. He's made a
Mhm.
few mistakes, but he's also had some really great games at center back. Now, when I watch Maguire play, and I would say the same about Lissandro up until his injury, they're two players when I'd say when they're playing on the pitch, there's not fear. There was no fear. They're not being too careful to make a mistake. They're not being, too nervous to do something. Maguire's hitting the long passes. Lissandro's charging up the field and being aggressive. I actually thought Lenny Yoro did it quite well against Leicester, by the way,
Yeah,
especially in the second half.
yeah,
I think he did really well. I think Mazraoui at center back has also been a lot better. Just in the last, couple times he's played at center back than at wing back. But there's a lot, especially in the front three and in the wing backs, where it's like so like careful all the time. That you don't. It's hard to see any speed of action kind of come through. So the players certainly have a part to play in all of that, and I'm hoping that they kind of buck up a little bit. I mean, it can't get worse, so go for it a little bit more is how I would feel. Like just kind of go for it a little bit if you're playing in this team, you know.
just yeah, make mistakes, have a little bit more risk,
Yep.
play with more gusto. The season's not over. They still
Yeah.
look like they're playing for things when they look like they might be out of cups, for instance.
Yeah.
They still look like they're playing for things when they're against Arsenal and Liverpool, but that might also be because of the fact that possession is sort of 50-50 in those games.
Yep.
You're also playing for the fact that you might go in the summer. Marcus
Yeah.
Rashford has just left, so no one's safe.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, there's definitely that too. I mean, you gotta, and that's kind of the thing, is I think almost every single player has to sit here and earn their place in the team next season. There's no guarantees, and obviously there's not just a willingness, but a need to shift any player that isn't 100% all in.
Yeah,
And to bring up like a positive on this, on say Garnacho, which I'm kind of surprised about a couple of situations, right? Because you know Garnacho was one where Amram essentially admitted, he wasn't fitting into the team. He probably wasn't happy with some of the way that he was playing, but he's adjusted, and you can see when he's come on recently and played, he's playing with a real, like, with a gusto, with an intensity that
Yeah.
is really hard for the opposition to deal with. And sometimes it's that simple. You're an athletic, fast player, and you put a lot of pressure on the opponent, and you force them to make errors, and you force them to make mistakes, and you take them out of their comfort zone. We know Ahmad does that, but Garnacho's been doing that recently. And it's gone from where, honestly, he could have been sold. He wasn't starting any games, and he wasn't really making the team. And there was talks of him leaving, to obviously he's become much better in recent times per Amarim. And then at the same time, you look at Kobbie Mainoo, and I'm not putting it on Kobbie Mainoo or saying he should be sold or something like that, but he kind of has a responsibility here too, to figure out what am I gonna do in this, because he's a little bit caught in the middle. I think is one of the slight surprises. Like when he was playing deep, he seemed, and Amarim said this, he seemed like not unfocused, but like maybe nervous, or he seemed too distracted by the defending to be aggressive in his actions. And then when he played as a 10, I still don't think he, honestly, I still don't think he has. I know a lot of people might disagree with me, but I still don't think he has the pace and the intensity to play as a 10 in this system against the Premier League sides. But he's got to do something to figure his game out too.
I think all of them do, though. I think all of them. You can't be a player who's like, well, I don't like adapting to the system. I'm not sure if it works. By the way, we need like 1 or 2 or 3 games where it starts to work and the gaps start to appear regularly. And we need to do it against not minnows, but against teams who set up well out of possession. I don't think Tottenham's a good example, because I feel like Tottenham are going to stupidly press Man United and then press disjointedly. But that might be, I don't know, if you can get a result there, that might be the shot in the arm that you need. But they need a game or two where it starts to work and the players start to believe more. Then they can come up with solutions themselves.
Yeah. I would agree. I think confidence is obviously a factor in that, and at some point, I do feel like the momentum will shift a little bit. And I mean, it is a huge change. I mean, I was looking at the numbers, and United went from like the 95th percentile on counters to playing on the counter to like the 20th percentile in possession or something like that to like 50th percentile encounters and like 75th percent on possession. And it's such a big change from how it was, like that the entire attacking style was, it gets to Bruno, everybody runs, and you launch it down the pitch. It is such a different change, and the learning curve with that, because that's literally how we played last year, the entire season, and for much of this season too. It was just and I think it really, interestingly, I would say fair play to Bruno for his adaptation this season, because I think he's one of the few players who's actually like
he's thriving in the role.
Yeah, he's like I still want him closer. But let me ask you a question,
by the way, because technically he's always been a good player. Always. It's just if you put him in a team where it's like you're the linchpin, you have to make things happen. When he's trying to make things happen and they don't come off, people are like, why is he doing that? He's been told to do that. Now he's been told to calm it down, and he can still do it. He's the one who, against Leicester, he was pinging it wide. He constantly found Garnacho. He's pinging it through the middle.
I got to ask you, though. I got to ask you on that. Okay, I got to ask you on this. I still think he should play closer to the goal. Like, I understand why I understand why it's happening now, but like, I think he's like, his solution finding in the front three is, even in the build-up, I think is better. Like, I look at Leicester and I'm like, he was deep. We still couldn't get out. We still couldn't build up with Bruno deep. So it didn't solve that problem. But when he receives it as a part of the front three, I feel he's one of the only players who can like turn quick, switch it, move it, and unlock a solution that a lot of the other forwards don't have the tools to unlock. at this point, even in the build up. And so it's the one kind of debatable thing for me is I feel like we haven't got better at moving it forward. But now we don't have him as a part of the front three until very late in games when we're chasing it and we're so piled forward that he can actually get involved. And his goal, like he was getting goals and assists like every game until he moved deep, and now he's not. And I feel like that is maybe it's a little more settled, but his future, I think, has to be in the front three, because I also would say he's not that great defensively still. But his future, I think he's got to get back into the front three, in my opinion.
Yeah, I thought it'd be Kobe, Ugarte, and then Bruno in the front three, but I feel like under Amrim he has worked better deeper. I look at some of the games that he's played in the 10, it's not really worked. His movement's kind of been off. Sometimes he's been too deep. Sometimes he doesn't have the pace to drag a man out and then back in, down running in the half space. I would, if in an ideal world, you'd have Diallo, whoever is playing the best out of Xerxes, Hoyland, Garnacho's substitution form left, and then I would have Bruno deeper right now. I just would, just because he's playing better there, and just because in the games where he's played in the left 10 or the right 10, it hasn't worked. But like you said, we do need him closer to goal a little bit. I'm just looking for more so when are the rotations going to come, and when are the United players going to be smart enough to start moving about all over the place and moving their men all over the place, because that's what's going to make this system tick. We can switch them around in different positions all we want. The fact is, in Amarim's sporting system, there was more movement.
Yes,
there was more players sort of rotating and finding space. And maybe that comes naturally with more time, and we have just had 18 games. There's there's people out there that are calling this shit. Fine, it is. But a lot of those same people lobbied to have Ten Hag as the manager this season just because he won an FA Cup, even though we got an absolute dross of a season last season. We had so many league games where he kept changing the style, and this wasn't working, and okay, let's play a game of ping pong. And just because he won a cup, it was all fine, and you were okay with seeing that. And just because he won a cup, it's not. It's just going to take a long time. We've had 18 games under Amarim. These aren't his players. He's had one window where he's brought one player in.
Who's got 45 minutes,
It's not, it's just, I'm sorry, we're just going to have to last the season now. There's 14 games left.
Yeah, and I think that's truly where we just have to accept it. We're going to see the same tactics every game. We're going to see the same play style every game. The hope is that the players get better, so that the movements are faster, so that there's a little bit more rotation, and adding little by little by little, it's growing, and hopefully it reaches a tipping point where it starts to be more good than it is bad. But we'll see how long that takes, honestly.
Yeah, we will, but we will just that's what we'll have to do.
One of the things I do hope that does occur, that we kind of did touch on, is by adding another fullback who's an aggressive, more forward-thinking player, that we will no longer see games where it's two defensive fullbacks, because their natural instincts, as we know, when Dalot and Mazraoui play, they drop so deep so quickly. They don't tend to stay high. They don't tend to take a man on in the same aggressive way that like Ahmad would, or where Ahmad can sit really high and pin a team back and get those out balls. Not always, right? But it's more like their natural like instinct is to be a bit deeper, and it makes like a 5 instead of a 3. And we've seen that we've struggled with that. So hopefully that's one aspect, is just by having always at least like Dorgu or Ahmad, hopefully both, in my opinion, soon, on the wings, in these wing-back positions, that will naturally be a little bit more aggressive, a little bit quicker, a little more offensive, a little more attacking rather than defensive. And that might shift things, shift the balance of things, because those wing-backs are really important at Sporting. I mean, like you were saying, every goal, 80%, comes from the wing-backs, the wingers, and the 9 in movements and how they all move together. Every single attack at Sporting. And so I know there's those are the two probably worst fitting positions that we have right now in terms of personnel. But hopefully, the change will help to kind of accommodate that.
Yeah, yeah.
Cool. All right. Well, yeah. I mean, we'll probably do this again.
I think
Maybe
we should.
we'll see if like there's any improvement, especially now that we do have a wing back. I think maybe after the next game and the next Cup or Europa game, we can look at it and say, have we settled onto something? Is there any improvements in what we're in this kind of build up structure that we're seeing now, or anything like that? And then kind of take it from there. But otherwise, we really have been seeing the same thing, and I think the biggest thing is seeing if there's little improvements, little incremental progress is moving forward through the rest of the season.
We'll just have to see, to be honest. We'll know more as the games come along, but I think we should do this again after we'll do it again actually in like the next week if you're free.
Yeah, let's do that. Okay, well then that's good. I think that'll about do it. That'll about cover it and catch us up to the present, and then we'll see what changes in the future. So thanks again for coming on. Hopefully we see it improve. Hopefully we see it speed up, and hopefully we can get a couple of wins together, because that confidence would surely help change the mood around everything, the team, the club, the fans, all of it, which I think is sorely needed as well.
I agree. Thanks so much for having me as always, James.
Of course, and thank you for everybody watching here on Big Up and on YouTube. Again, if you want to come watch these and other videos live, make sure you come over to this platform. Otherwise, thank you for watching, and we'll see you later.